The Matrix Online, Star Wars Galaxies, City of Heroes, Family Guy Online. What do all of these games have in common? I don't know, they're all dead. Every single one, they're dead, they're gone. These are just some of the beloved MMORPGs in the decades-long history of the genre that are completely lost to time, now inaccessible, with characters that people invested hundreds of hours and even dollars into no longer able to be played. But is that the way it has to be? Do these MMOs need to die? Yeah. The thing is, any multiplayer game with a centralized server like MMORPGs are going to end eventually. It's just a fact of the genre. And my issue isn't with the fact that these games shut down. I think there's something that can be done after they're shut down. Hi, I'm Idle, president of MMORPGs, and under my presidency, death is only the beginning. I've been thinking a lot about dead MMORPGs lately and what should happen after that death, and I have thoughts. Here are my thoughts. Part 1, stop killing games. You might be wondering why I'm thinking so much about dead MMOs, and one reason is, but more importantly, recently a streamer and former Blizzard employee named Pirate Software made a video called Stop Killing Games. This video was essentially a response to a petition in the EU by the same name, and he didn't like that petition. This movement aims to enact laws that will force publishers to keep games in a playable state after support has ended without requiring any sort of connection to the publisher. The main reason for this petition is because of the rise of something called live service games and DRM. If you're watching this video, you're probably pretty stupid, so let me explain what live service and DRM are. According to ChatGPT, DRM stands for Digital Rights Management. But then I asked ChatGPT to lie to me, and it told me it stands for Dinosaur Riding Machine. Which is the truth? You decide. The most popular form of DRM when I was growing up was CD keys. You know that little code you get on the back of the box after you got home from GameStop, and the entire car ride home you were just reading the back of the box and you were seeing like, oh my god, look at all this cool stuff I'm gonna be able to do in this game. And then eventually you get home and while the game's installing from the CD, you'd be reading the strategy guide and you'd be like, yeah, get me in there. Sorry, wait, hold on, what were we talking about? The most popular type and almost the only kind of DRM you get these days is called always online DRM. This basically means your game will be constantly connected to the internet and communicating with the publisher to authenticate the game. Think about it like your game automatically entering CD keys all the time while you're playing. The downside of always online DRM though is that if that authentication server ever goes offline for whatever reason, your game's dead. You can't play it anymore. This isn't just fear-mongering, by the way. There are examples of this exact thing happening to many games. Darkspore is a famous example of a game where the DRM authentication server was taken offline, and now to this day, no one can play it. But to be fair, no one wanted to play it anyway, so it's not that big of a loss. Despite the fact that there's been a lot of games that have gone through this DRM issue, a lot of communities have found workarounds to keep the games alive after support has ended. According to the law, these workarounds are what experts would call a crime, but no one knows for sure what that word means. Live service games also require a constant connection to the internet, but usually not just for authentication purposes. This connection can allow for seamless drop-in, drop-out multiplayer, or the delivering of new content or seasons, or really anything else that you would want to be connected to the internet for. If you're thinking, hey, live service sounds a lot like what MMORPGs are, because you're always connected to the internet, and it's live, well then, you're not as dumb as your friends think you are. Trust me, I'm always talking to your friends and they're like, they're so stupid. And I'm like, I know, but give them a shot. I think they're not that stupid. But the term live service covers a bit more ground than MMORPGs. As you can see on this chart here of Google Trends, the term live service started gaining traction around 2010. I think this coincides with the announcement that Diablo 3, one of the most anticipated PC games of its time, would require a constant internet connection even when playing on completely single-player game modes. Since then, more and more games have followed this live service model, whether they have only multiplayer game modes or even offer a single-player game mode. Just like DRM, if those live service servers ever go offline, the game's done. So the concern of the Stop Killing Games movement is to not have live service games and DRM-based games just die when the servers inevitably shut down. When Pirate Software talked about this initiative, which to be fair, I think has a lot of flaws in its messaging, he was really against it. But the reason I want to address those points in this broader video is because when he talks specifically about multiplayer-only games, which includes MMORPGs, I think his thoughts were misguided, and I think it might lead the industry in a negative direction. Like I said before, I'm the president of MMORPGs, and I have thoughts. Here are my thoughts. Oh God, that was my stomach. I'm really hungry, you guys. Actually, I'm so hungry that I might... Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. I forgot to feed myself, that's how I got here. But luckily, today's sponsor, Factor75, can stop you from ending up like me. What's Factor? Factor takes the stress out of meal planning and going to the grocery store and all of that other junk that comes with feeding yourself. They'll send you chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. And you don't have to worry about prepping and cooking all of this stuff yourself. All you have to do is take it out, heat it up, and enjoy. And they've got the options to fit any diet like keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, whatever you need. I've personally used Factor plenty in the past and it's helped me spend a lot of time definitely working and not just playing a lot of MMORPGs. Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty good, but I'm gonna need like a discount code or something if you're really gonna get me interested. Well, boy, do I have news for you. If you use my link in the description and pinned comment right now, you can get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month's order. So you're telling me I could get back to gaming ASAP? That sounds pretty sweet. I sure am, champ. Just remember to use the link in the description or use code IDLESEP50 at checkout to get the best deal possible. Part 2. MMO no mo. I'm sorry. Like I said from the top, every MMORPG will die at some point. World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Guild Wars 2, all of these games will eventually meet their end. And that's because MMOs are really expensive to run and maintain. Even if the company has decided not to release new content updates, you still need manpower to moderate the servers and ban cheaters, or else it's just going to fall into a state of disrepair that makes no one happy. But that doesn't mean these server shutdowns needs to be the end of the legacy for that MMO. And history has proven that it's not. Star Wars Galaxies was one of the most beloved MMORPGs of its era since it came out in 2003. Sure, it never reached the heights that World of Warcraft did in 2004 and 2005, but it still had a really large player base, and before some controversial updates, was one of the best liked MMOs on the market. In December of 2011, Star Wars Galaxies was taken offline permanently, just 5 days ahead of the Star Wars The Old Republic MMO launch. Star Wars The Old Republic, despite being a Star Wars MMO, was really not related to Star Wars Galaxies at all. It was made by different people, it had different design philosophies, and really, it's just an entirely different game. But it was published by the same publisher. Either way, Star Wars Galaxies was gone, and official servers to this day, over 13 years later, haven't returned. So what did the players of Star Wars Galaxies do? Cry on the internet? Wallow in self-pity? Yeah, but more importantly, a bunch of volunteers reverse engineered the game through something they call the scientific method to create private servers of Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies Emulator, or SWG-EMU as it's called, and that's a mouthful, is one of the most popular private servers for Star Wars Galaxies, along with Star Wars Galaxies Legends. From what I can tell from the developers of Star Wars Galaxies Emulator, they are genuinely servers that were built from scratch just based on observing gameplay data of Star Wars Galaxies. That means there's no code from Star Wars Galaxies inside these private servers. According to them, that makes it legal. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if that's true, but if YouTube has taught me anything, it's that if you just say no copyright intended when you upload clips of a TV show, you're in the clear and no one can do anything to you. But I want to hammer home how insane this is. To rebuild a game from scratch just based on observing what the gameplay was like and what you remember of it takes an incredible amount of effort, and that's just because they wanted to. It's a passion project. What I find interesting about these private server communities is the different directions they've taken these games. Star Wars Galaxies Emulator aims to preserve the game in the state that they thought was the peak of Star Wars Galaxies. That's around 2005, before the combat upgrade and new game experiences. Those were those controversial updates I talked about a little bit earlier. Meanwhile, Star Wars Legends is more like what Star Wars Galaxies was in its final days, just before it was shut down. And they've even released their own original content for the game, albeit a bit slowly, because This is all just volunteer freelance work. There are tons of other Star Wars Galaxy servers out there that either try to preserve the game in certain states or even just take the game in a wild new direction. It's really up to the private server admins what they do with it, and it's up to the players to choose what they want to experience. What I think is so great about these servers though is that even though Star Wars Galaxies isn't officially available from Sony anymore, new players can still find and discover these games and see what made them special and even create their own new memories and stories. It's a really special act of preservation, and I do think MMOs deserve preservation if it's possible. Star Wars Galaxies isn't the only MMO from back in the day that has its own private server scene. Asheron's Call, while not having very many centralized servers, does have a place where you can download a server that you can run locally on your machine. It's the ultimate private server because it'll only be you. Even RuneScape Classic, which was the original version of RuneScape that was taken offline around 10 years ago, has a private server community that aims to preserve what RuneScape Classic was like. There's actually like a decent amount of players. That's very surprising. Have you seen what this game looks like? All I'm saying is there's a market for this preservation, guys. What I'm saying is that history has shown that whether it's a small group of players or not, there is a demand out there for the preservation of these old games in various different states, and it's really great that these players are putting in the effort to make them, but I think it's a shame it's so difficult to get up and running. Oh yeah, and there's the little issue that in most cases it is literally copyright infringement to run private servers. Yeah, that's not great. Being a criminal is not great, guys. That's what I think needs to change. When these MMOs go offline and the company no longer has use for it, I think it'd be great to support the private server community in little ways that don't take a lot of time or effort or money for these companies. I want to stress that I'm talking about private servers specifically for games that have been shut down, not for games that are currently running, like World of Warcraft or old school RuneScape. I can't imagine ever having private servers that are endorsed by old school RuneScape. I can't imagine ever having private servers that are endorsed by old school. Part 3, official private servers. About a year ago, I made this video talking about what I called official private servers for old school RuneScape. Basically, I was saying that Jagex, the creators of old school RuneScape, should let the players run their own little servers that they can change the rules on and add content or lock content. It was a pretty crazy idea, and a lot of people really didn't like it. When you really boil it down to its core elements, my idea isn't that different from what Stop Killing Games is hoping for. The ability to run server executables of these MMORPGs where you have creative freedom over them, or you can just leave them as they are. If you're a reasonable person, this whole idea should sound a little bit crazy to you. I mean, why would a company, a for-profit company, willingly give away its IP for players to do with what they please? Well, the way I see it, there's two possible reasons. Number one, the kindness of the billionaire executive's heart, because they just want to see players be happy. Why are you looking at me like that? Number two, the ability to license these servers from the companies directly. I'm literally talking about paying the companies for the ability to run these servers. It's capitalism, baby. We're giving them our money. I think the second idea, which is literally the idea I had in that video I talked about, is the most likely. Because literally Jagex just days ago announced something called Project Xanaris, where they are letting players rent servers on which they can do what they please with a snapshot of old school RuneScape. Listen, I'm not saying I called it, but Project Xanaris, or more colloquially called community servers, will let players rent servers from Jagex where they can boost XP rates, boost drop rates, region lock the content, and more. And it's reasonable to assume that if this idea is a success, which is not a guarantee, that the things we'll be able to change and add to on these servers will grow. Like maybe we'll be able to create our own bosses and monsters and custom items and even upload custom art assets. I don't know, the sky is quite literally the limit if this works out. Jagex is making it easier and legal to run these kinds of servers that, as it stands today, are already all over the place. Making private servers easier to host and legal is a great win-win in my opinion, because Jagex gets to make a little bit more money off of it and players can express their creativity. This is an idea that I think even Sony, the publishers of Star Wars Galaxies, could pull off if they wanted to, even though Star Wars Galaxies is shut down. They still own the IP, and realistically, the code's around there somewhere. If they want to license private servers, I think they could. I do want to make it clear though, there are plenty of potential drawbacks to this idea for old school RuneScape in particular, and the wider implications of if multiple companies did this. Like, what if Jagex goes under? Do these private servers go away? I would say probably, and that doesn't really help preservation, does it? There's tons of points like these that I don't want to go through all in this video, but I do have a video on my brand new second channel, Idle Slop. This is where I'll be posting all my slop. Go get my slop. On this channel, I'm gonna post my full thoughts on Project Xanaris, what I think could go wrong, and why I think it's ultimately a good thing, which you can probably tell I think it's a good thing. Go subscribe. Oh, and also subscribe here, I guess, if you want to. You don't have to, it's fine. I think what all of this ultimately shows is the first signs that the MMO industry might be warming up to letting players express their creativity and also preserve these games in a way that benefits everyone. But this idea is still really fresh and really scary, and what we need to find out as a community is if it's something we want and something that actually does benefit us. And since this is a lot like what the Stop Killing Games movement wants, there's been some pretty vocal feedback. Part 4. Why not? If you remember at the start of the video, I talked about Pirate Software, who is pretty vocally opposed to the Stop Killing Games movement. And since there's so much similarity in what I think is a positive direction for the MMO community to go and the Stop Killing Games movement, I'm basically going to use this whole section to reply to Pirate Software. Hi Pirate Software, I'm Idle, president of MMOs. What's that? You're a hacker who worked at Blizzard and Amazon Games? Wow, you should mention that more. If you want to see the full thoughts I'm going to be responding to, it's mainly focused on his part 2 of his Stop Killing Games video. In this video, he basically only talks about multiplayer only games. Spoiler alert, MMORPGs are multiplayer only. If the Stop Killing Games movement got exactly what they wanted, basically what would happen is that any MMORPG that shuts down would be forced to release their server executable so that anyone could run private servers. Again, it's not exactly like the idea I had, but it's close enough that I feel like it's worth defending. For example, if World of Warcraft were to shut down tomorrow, then Blizzard would be forced to release World of Warcraft server executables, and then anyone could spin up a private server. Pirate Software's main concern with a law like this is the effect it would have on the retail versions of these games, or the currently running MMORPGs. In his opinion, if after an MMO dies, a bunch of private servers can spin up from the corpse of that MMO, there's now an incentive for bad actors to do what they can to shut down the game. They could do this through mass botting or DDoS attacks, or things that every MMO is literally already dealing with. The point of these attacks would be to make the game such a low quality experience that it bleeds players and is no longer profitable for the companies running them. So they shut down, and then boom, private servers for everyone. To his credit, that's scary. Private servers would not be better than having a main centralized server. They're actually a downgrade. I want them for preservation reasons, not because I think they're strictly better than what's currently out there. Pirate Software even specifically cites the Team Fortress 2 situation that is going through something a little bit like this. You might not be familiar with the Team Fortress 2 situation because you have something called a life, but luckily for you, I don't. So here's the Team Fortress 2 situation. There are a lot of bots and cheaters in Team Fortress 2, and Valve not doing anything. It's real bad out there. It's basically unplayable. How unplayable is it? Well, recently, the Team Fortress 2 community published a full book of names of players who want Valve to do something about it, and then they sent it to Valve. That's actually kind of fucking awesome. Like, good job, guys. I hope it works. From what I can tell, Valve doesn't want to fix the botting issues because you don't really ever fix botting or cheating. It's kind of a constant arms race where the devs will come up with a solution, the bots and cheaters will find a workaround, and then the devs have to come up with another solution. Any fan of any MMO knows what this is like. Bots might be temporarily shut down after an update, but usually only takes a couple of days for them to come back. So maybe Pirate Software is right. If a game as big as Team Fortress 2 can face these issues, then it's not that far of a logical leap to say that any MMO could be essentially taken offline via the same strategies. Except, no, not really. Like I said, the issue is that Valve doesn't want to invest the time or money to support the Team Fortress 2 servers. They could cut down on bots and cheaters. They have the ability, but they're choosing not to. So the real issue is a lack of support from Valve, not really the fact that there's a bunch of bots in the game. If there was something like private servers for Team Fortress 2 that admins could ban cheaters on and maintain to make sure it's in a playable state, then that would kind of preserve Team Fortress 2. That's exactly what's happening. Team Fortress 2 has community servers that are in a much better state than the main Team Fortress 2 servers. They have much fewer botters and cheaters, and no, it's not an ideal solution because the player pool is obviously smaller, but still, it's proof that these private servers, when the main company is no longer willing to support the game, is a viable alternative. I'm not even a big Team Fortress 2 guy. I just did 2 seconds of research to find out that that's what a lot of Team Fortress 2 players have resorted to. Yes, in their perfect world, Valve will do something, but if they're not going to, then players' ability to run community servers is quite literally preserving Team Fortress 2. The idea is in action. It's working. It's something. So when Pirate Software cites the Team Fortress 2 situation as proof of what could happen, I don't think he realizes he's actually making a pretty good point in favor of making private servers available. But let's play this argument out a little bit further, where a game like World of Warcraft is forced to shut down and then private servers spin up. Pirate Software's next issue is that, let's say a big private server does come up after the death of the retail game, maybe even run by the people who shut down the retail game. Well, then there's nothing stopping them from monetizing this server in really predatory and gross ways, especially if there's no laws preventing that. And you don't really want to start writing more laws, because then things get really messy in this situation really fast. And what he's saying is true. It would suck if there was a huge private server that really did a great job of preserving what that game was like, and then the admins of that private server started monetizing it in ways that just ruined the experience. That's bad. We see this happen all the time in modern MMOs, like RuneScape 3 is literally ruined for a lot of people because of how much monetization there is. But you have to think about why we really hate this monetization. It's because there's no other choice. If you want to play RuneScape 3, here's your choice. Unless you want to go on some sketchy private servers that are, again, illegal, this is what you have to play. If there were a bunch of legal private servers spun up from the corpse of World of Warcraft and one, even if it was the biggest, started monetizing in ways players didn't like, there's gonna be a lot of other servers out there to choose from. History has already shown that when it comes to private servers, the masses will gravitate to whatever is the highest quality experience. When Warlords of Draenor for World of Warcraft came out, widely regarded as one of the worst expansions in the game's history, one of the biggest private servers at the time was called Nostalrius. It was actually really impressively massive. It was not the only private server option on the market at that time, trust me. There's always been hundreds of WoW private servers. But the reason people went for Nostalrius is because they wanted vanilla World of Warcraft, which Nostalrius was, and they wanted one that was run kinda how Blizzard ran their games. Of course, Nostalrius was shut down by Blizzard because, again, private servers almost always are copyright infringement. It's illegal. That's an issue. But it is an example that players do value well-run communities. I hate to put on my capitalist hat here, but I really do think the free market would decide what comes out on top. Yuck, ugh. But Pirate Software's final concern is one I find myself actually kind of agreeing with. He poses the question that, is it actually preservation of these MMOs to spin up private servers? He says that MMORPGs, and really any multiplayer-only game, is a product of the time it exists in. This is actually a good point. When I think back to my favorite memories on RuneScape, I think back to 2005 and 2006 when me and my friends would stay up all night at sleepovers crafting law runes so we could buy the Infinity set. I mean, look how good this set looks. This is still the best looking gear in any MMO of all time. Jagex, you really cooked with this one. And no amount of private servers could bring that feeling back. But that's not what the preservation is aiming to do. Like I said with Star Wars Galaxies, the fact that there are these 2005 era Star Wars Galaxies servers and even 2011 and beyond era servers for Star Wars Galaxies presents an opportunity for new players and even old players to go back to these worlds they invested so much time into, or maybe never explored at all, and create their own memories, their own new memories. I still see on Twitter people going back to the RuneScape Classic servers, and they're so happy they exist so they can revisit these places they loved as a kid, because it means something today, even if it doesn't mean the same thing that it did back then. Forcing private servers to be made available after an MMO shuts down is a really complicated issue and has the potential to have tons of adverse effects. For example, what if a company that made an MMO doesn't want to release their IP in that way? Then there's an incentive for them to do basically what Valve is doing with Team Fortress 2, which is just keep servers running in a state of complete disrepair that makes no one happy. That's a legitimate concern to me. But the spirit of the idea is one I really agree with, because we already have historical evidence that this has value to people, and I think preservation in this form is awesome and even important. Either way, I'd really like to know what you guys think, because there's tons of holes you can poke in this idea, and I think it's important that we talk about that. Even if this never comes to pass, it's a cool discussion to have about these games that we love so much. But I'm gonna go to sleep now, so